In 1898, the United States gained control of the Philippines, ending more than 300 years of Spanish rule and marking the start of American colonialism in Asia. But how did this happen? And what followed in the wake of this dramatic power shift? Let's dive into the story of the Spanish-American War, the transfer of colonial rule over the Philippines from Spain to the United States, and the bloody Philippine-American War that followed. Spain ruled the Philippines for more than 300 years, from 1565 to 1898. The Spanish colonial era began with the arrival of Miguel López de Legazpi, who established the first Spanish settlement in Cebu. Over the centuries, Spain introduced Christianity, built an extensive colonial bureaucracy, and faced numerous uprisings from Filipinos seeking independence. The story of how the Philippines became a United States colony begins with the Spanish-American War, which started in April of 1898. The war's roots lay in Cuba's struggle for independence from Spain. The United States was drawn in by humanitarian concerns, economic interests, and sensationalized media coverage known as yellow journalism. The tipping point in the conflict was the explosion of the USS Maine in Havana Harbor on February 15, 1898, killing 251 American sailors. Although the cause remains debated, the U.S. blamed Spain, and the rallying cry became, "Remember the Maine!" By April, the United States declared war on Spain. But the war wasn't just fought in the Caribbean. The first major battle took place in the Pacific at Manila Bay. On May 1, 1898, the U.S. Navy, led by Commodore George Dewey, destroyed the Spanish fleet, effectively ending Spain's naval presence in the region. At the same time, Filipino revolutionaries, led by Emilio Aguinaldo, were fighting for independence from Spain. With U.S. support, they captured much of the countryside. However, this alliance would soon unravel. The Spanish-American War ended with the Treaty of Paris in December 1898. Under the treaty, Spain ceded the Philippines, along with Guam and Puerto Rico, to the United States. In return, the U.S. paid Spain $20 million. Filipino hopes for independence were dashed as the Philippines transitioned from Spanish to American rule. This brings us to the Philippine-American War, a conflict that erupted in February 1899 when tensions between American forces and Filipino nationalists boiled over. Emilio Aguinaldo's government, which had declared independence on June 12, 1898, refused to accept American colonization. The war was brutal. Filipino forces initially fought conventional battles, but soon turned to guerrilla tactics. In response, the U.S. used harsh counterinsurgency measures, including the establishment of reconcentration camps. Civilians suffered immensely from violence, famine, and disease. President Theodore Roosevelt declared the conflict over on July 4, 1902, but sporadic resistance continued for years. The human cost was staggering. 20,000 Filipino soldiers and 4,200 American troops died, alongside hundreds of thousands of Filipino civilians. The Philippines remained a U.S. colony until gaining independence in 1946. The Spanish-American War and its aftermath reshaped global politics and left a lasting legacy in the Philippines. What began as a war of liberation in Cuba ended with the United States becoming a colonial power in the Pacific. The Philippine-American War serves as a sobering reminder of the costs of imperial ambition. The early 20th century marked the era of colonial rule of the United States over the Philippines. First, the U.S. established a civil government, and future American President William Howard Taft was appointed Governor-General in 1901. Filipinos were gradually allowed to participate through the Philippine Assembly, formed in 1907 with Sergio Osmeña as Speaker of the Assembly. By 1935, the Philippine Commonwealth was established as a transitional government with Manuel L. Quezon as president, preparing the country for full independence. Laws like the Jones Act of 1916 and the Tydings-McDuffie Act of 1934 laid out a roadmap for independence, which would finally come after World War II. One of the most lasting changes was in education. The Americans introduced a public school system with English as the medium of instruction. Thousands of American teachers, known as Thomasites, came to teach. Strategically located in Southeast Asia, the Philippine Islands were seen as America's unsinkable aircraft carrier. With tensions rising in the Pacific, the U.S. bolstered its military presence, fortifying bases like Clark Airfield and Subic Bay. General Douglas MacArthur was appointed to oversee the defense of the islands, but no one could have predicted the devastating events to come. On December 8, 1941, just hours after the attack on Pearl Harbor, Japan launched airstrikes on the Philippines. In a matter of days, their ground forces landed in northern Luzon, pushing towards the capital, Manila. To avoid destruction, Manila was declared an open city and fell to Japanese forces in early January 1942. But the battle wasn't over yet. Filipino and American troops regrouped for a last stand on the Bataan Peninsula. Despite overwhelming odds, the defenders of Bataan fought valiantly, holding off Japanese forces for 3 grueling months. But without sufficient supplies or reinforcements, Bataan fell on April 9, 1942. This surrender led to the infamous Bataan Death March, where tens of thousands of prisoners were forced to march over 60 miles in brutal conditions. Thousands died along the way. Meanwhile, on Corregidor Island, the last Allied stronghold, troops held out until May 6, 1942, when they were finally overwhelmed. The entire Philippines was now under Japanese control. When General MacArthur was ordered to evacuate to Australia, he left with a bold promise: "I shall return."
I said to the people of the Philippines whence I came, I shall return.
This pledge became a rallying cry for Filipinos and Americans alike. In October 1944, MacArthur fulfilled his promise. U.S. forces landed in Leyte Gulf, beginning the liberation of the Philippines. The Battle of Leyte Gulf, the largest naval battle in history, crippled Japan's ability to resupply its forces, paving the way for Allied victories on land. By February 1945, Manila was freed after a month of intense urban warfare. The city, once known as the Pearl of the Orient, was left in ruins, but the spirit of its people endured. The war devastated the Philippines, with over 1 million lives lost and entire cities destroyed. But out of the ashes came new hope. On July 4, 1946, the Philippines gained full independence, fulfilling a promise decades in the making. After their victory over the Japanese in World War II, the Philippines and the United States have continued to strengthen their bond. The U.S. provided economic aid to help rebuild the Philippines after the devastation of the war. In 1951, the two countries signed the Mutual Defense Treaty. This formalized their alliance, committing both nations to defend each other in the event of an armed attack in the Pacific region, a promise that remains central to their relationship today. In 1991, the Philippine Senate voted against renewing the U.S. base agreements, resulting in the closure of Subic Bay and Clark Air Base. While this marked a shift in their military relationship, the alliance remained strong through agreements like the Visiting Forces Agreement, signed in 1998. One of the biggest challenges in the relationship today is the situation in the South China Sea. China's aggressive territorial claims have put the Philippines on the front lines of regional security tensions. The U.S. has reaffirmed its commitment under the Mutual Defense Treaty, supporting the Philippines in defending its territorial integrity. Agreements like the Enhanced Defense Cooperation Agreement have allowed for greater U.S. military presence in the region, focusing on joint training, disaster response, and regional security. The U.S.-Philippines relationship is a dynamic and enduring partnership built on shared history, mutual defense, and cultural ties. From the battlefields of World War II to today's strategic challenges, this alliance continues to shape the future of the Indo-Pacific region.